Hello! In this video, we are going to talk about common mistakes that we have seen students make when talking to their instructors. One really important thing to remember for this video is that the things that are talked about are just suggestions. There are no real rules for how to make the most polite request in English, but there are suggestions and we will take a look at those.
Two students walk into Dr. Kim's office asking for a letter of recommendation. They are Malik and Seema. Each student uses different requests to ask for the letter of recommendation. Let's read the conversations together and see what they say. Malik: Hello, Dr. Kim. I have a question to ask you. Sure, what is it? I need a letter of recommendation from you. That is what I came to ask you about. Can you help me? Seema: Hello, Dr. Kim. Do you have a moment to talk? Sure. How can I help you? Well, I recently learned about a really great scholarship opportunity, and this scholarship would help me pay my tuition next term. I was wondering if you could write a letter of recommendation for me. Okay. Now it's time to use the worksheet. Click pause to stop the video. Go to worksheet section 2.1 and answer the questions. When you are finished with the worksheet, click play to start the video again.
If you chose Seema as a more polite student, you're right. On the left, you can see that Malik used the verbs need and can in order to make his request. He also seemed to demand that you receive the letter of recommendation by saying, I need a letter of recommendation from you. He also asked Dr. Kim if he could help him by saying, Can you help me? Seema used a different strategy. She said, I was wondering if you could write a letter of recommendation for me. This is very polite. So why was Seema's request more polite than Malik's? Well, Seema also said some things before the request, and Malik didn't say anything before his request. Seema said, well, I recently learned about a really great scholarship opportunity, and this scholarship would help me pay my tuition next term. These two sentences are very polite because they prepare Dr. Kim to hear the request that Seema will give. Let's learn a little bit more about pre-requests.
When making an important request in English, some speakers will usually say something before they make the request. These statements are called pre-requests. Pre-requests are information that help explain the request or help someone get ready for the request. They might give information about the request. They might give reasons why the request should be granted. They might prepare the instructor to hear the request, or they might talk about how important the request is. Most importantly, they are extremely polite and they show the instructor that you really care about the request. Here are some examples of pre-requests. This scholarship would help me pay my tuition next term. This scholarship is related to my major. I recently learned about an amazing scholarship opportunity. This scholarship would look really good on my resume. As you can see, all of these pre-requests give reasons why the request should be granted. Now, let's talk a little bit more about requests.
Usually, when making a request to an instructor in the U.S., we use certain polite phrases. Here are a few of them. I was wondering if you could. Would it be possible? Is it possible? Could you? Notice that all of these requests are questions. In the U.S., the most polite way to ask for something is to make it into a question. Notice that Malik did not use a question in his first request for the letter of recommendation. He said, I need a letter of recommendation from you.
This is not a question, so it's not polite in the U.S. if you are asking an instructor using this sentence.
Okay, Let's try another one. Let's read this conversation together. G. Hello, Dr. Kim. Do you have some time to talk? Sure. How can I help you? Could you write me a letter of recommendation?
Okay. Click pause to stop the video. Go to worksheet section 2.2 and answer the questions. When you are finished with the worksheet, click play to start the video again.
When making a request, it's best to include a pre-request. Notice that G's request did not include a pre-request. Remember, when talking to instructors, it's always best to include a pre-request. So here are a few examples that G could have used. This scholarship would help me pay my tuition next term. This scholarship is related to my major. This scholarship would look really good on my resume. This scholarship is an amazing opportunity. Remember, pre-requests help us show the instructor how important the request is to us because we explain the situation in more detail. Okay, let's look at another example.
Let's read another request from a student to an instructor.
Lynn. Hi, Dr. Ramat. Do you have some time to talk? Of course. How can I help you? I recently learned about an amazing scholarship opportunity. This scholarship would look really good on my resume. So, can you write a letter of recommendation for me?
Okay. Click pause to stop the video. Go to worksheet section 2.3 and answer the questions. When you are finished with the worksheet, click play to start the video again.
Okay, let's look at what Lynn said to Dr. Ramat. Lynn used two really good pre-requests. I recently learned about an amazing scholarship opportunity, and this scholarship would look really good on my resume. Here is a list of requests we should not use when making a request to an instructor. When talking to an instructor in the U.S., it is usually impolite to use need or want because they aren't really questions. They sound more like demands, and we don't want to demand for a letter of recommendation and sound impolite. We also don't want to use imperatives like give, because that also sounds really impolite too.
Also, when talking to an instructor, we should not use the modal verb can.
Use can with friends, but not instructors. Let's look at some examples of polite requests. Lynn could have used several types of polite requests. I was wondering if you could write me a letter of recommendation. Would you be willing to write me a letter of recommendation? Could you write me a letter of recommendation?
If she had used any of these, her request would have sounded very polite.
Notice that all of these requests are questions. Requests that are questions are usually the most polite requests you can make to instructors. So you can replace Lynn's impolite request with a much more polite request like any of these three. And you will sound much more polite when talking to an instructor.
So now, take a moment and write down a request for Abdul on your worksheet. Click pause to stop the video. Go to worksheet section 2.4 and answer the questions. When you are finished with the worksheet, click play to start the video again.
Let's look at some possible choices. As we talked about earlier, a good request should have a pre-request and a polite request. On the left, here are a few of the possible pre-requests that Abdul could have used. I recently learned about an amazing scholarship opportunity. This scholarship is related to my major. This scholarship will help me pay my tuition next term. I think I have a very good chance of getting this scholarship. This scholarship will look great on my resume. Abdul could have used any of these pre-requests before he made the request to the instructor. As a reminder, pre-requests come before the request. Now for Abdul's possible request, he could have used any of these. Would you be willing to write me a letter of recommendation for this scholarship? I was wondering if you could write me a letter of recommendation for this scholarship. Could you write a letter of recommendation for this scholarship I'm applying for? Would it be possible for you to write a letter of recommendation for this scholarship I'm applying for? Abdul could have used any of these requests with the pre-request in order to make a really polite request to his instructor. So when you're making a request to an instructor, you can choose any of these pre-requests and any of these really polite requests and combine them together to make a very polite request to your instructor. Thank you so much for watching these videos with me today, and I hope you learned some valuable information about making requests in English. Have fun making requests!